Hi, everybody. 4-H is really all about learning to do things in a fun way. And as a part of that, you get to learn some really important life skills. It could be anything from learning to speak publicly, to defending your decisions, to doing little things for yourself in order to be self-sufficient. And so today, I want to share one of those things that you may not realize it, but you will use throughout your life. And that is to sew on a button. Now, I have this shirt, and I wanted to wear it the other day, and it's brand new. But guess what? They didn't sew on the button very well. So before I can wear it, I'm going to have to repair it. And in fact, it happens so often with things like this that you purchase that they actually give you an extra button, usually on the tag. So this is something that you're going to learn how to do because someday you're going to get ready to get dressed and you're going to need to sew on a button. So in order to do this, you're going to need a couple of essential things. You're going to need some thread. You're going to need a piece of fabric. You're going to need a needle, a hand sewing needle, and you're going to need a button. Now I have a couple of buttons here and I want to show you the differences between them. You're also going to need some scissors, and you may want to use a toothpick, but this is kind of an optional thing. So let's talk about the different kinds of buttons. Now, my mother is an excellent seamstress, and she was also my 4-H leader when I was growing up in my club. And she taught me how to sew, and she taught me how to sew on buttons. Well, I'm not really a great sewer or seamstress, but I can sew on a button, and I've actually taught people how to do this myself. So I have some different examples of buttons for you. This button, and you can see on the back of it, it actually has this piece underneath the button itself, and so the button, you don't see the thread showing through. This is a shank button. These two are flap buttons. One has 2 holes. This one has 4 holes. Okay, so you sew these on the same way, but we're going to actually practice with the 4-hole button because this one you have a different technique. Since you have 4 holes for the thread to go through, we're going to put that through in an X pattern. So you have your piece of fabric and you have your needle. So when you have your needle, you need to thread it with some thread. Once you get that through there, you're going to actually cut that, double up your thread, and knot it. So you actually have 2 strands of thread here being put in as one. If you have trouble with threading a needle, you might need to get some help with that. But I think most of you will probably have better eyesight to be able to thread your needle than I do. And it just takes a little bit of practice to get that through. Okay, so usually you're going to have a particular spot, right, like this one, where you need for your button to go. On our practice piece of fabric, we don't really have that. We can put it anywhere. So in your first step, you're going to take your needle and you're going to push it up through the bottom of your fabric where you want your button to go. And then you're going to actually put the button on there and pull the thread through one of the holes. Now, since we have 4 holes on this button, we want to go into the hole that's not directly across, but crisscross from the first hole. So you're going to push your needle and thread back through the fabric. Now this might take a little bit of practice. You want to try to get that fairly close together on the back, but this is what it will look like initially. Then you're going to come back up through one of the 2 remaining holes. And again, this might take a little bit of practice for you. Pull it all the way through until it's snug. And then you'll go back crisscross again through the opposite hole until your thread makes an X in those holes in the button. Now normally I would match my thread to my fabric, but I wanted you to be able to see it a little better today for our purposes. So now you're just going to continue that pattern until you're satisfied that you have enough thread holding your button on. Now, at this point, you can actually slide a toothpick between your button and the fabric if you want to be sure that you have enough space there. I usually don't do this step, but you certainly can. You would just slide it underneath just like this. That just leaves a little gap so that when you have that extra layer of fabric holding and your button holds those two pieces together, that it lays nice and flat. But that's at your discretion. You can do that or not do that. But you're going to continue to make your X pattern through your buttonholes until you have that button on there securely. And I like to go several times. I don't really like to be wearing something and then have my button get all loose or lose it over time. So I like to put them on where they stay on. So we're just going to keep doing this X pattern. Now, if you're somebody that has a tendency to poke themselves with a needle, you might want to use a thimble. And a thimble just protects your finger from the needle. And if you're going to be sewing on a regular basis, you're going to need a pin cushion and some other things to go along with that. I do a lot of button repair. A lot of buttons get put on. And so I actually have what I call a button box. And in my box, I have an assortment of different sizes and shapes and styles of buttons. And I have a little pair of scissors, and I have some needles, and I have some different colors of thread. And that way, anytime I need to put on a button, I just go get my button box and I'm ready to go. I'm all set. And you can put together your own button box. All right, so I think I've got this on here pretty securely. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up from the back side of the fabric, but I'm not going to go through the button. And I'm actually going to take some thread and I'm going to wind it around underneath my button, but in between my button and the fabric. Now that just helps create some space. Then when I get done with that, I'm going to go back through the fabric, and then I'm going to make a knot. I might have not left myself quite enough length, so you want to be sure when you do this that you have enough thread left that you can make your knot. And once you make your knot, then you just trim off these ends. And ta-da, you have your button. So if this is something that you think you need to do a lot of, you have a lot of things that need to have buttons put on them, you can practice like this. Just pick any kind of scrap piece of fabric. You can even use a bandana or just a little fabric square of some kind, and you can practice sewing on these buttons. I guarantee you this is something that you're going to do throughout your lifetime.